he works 4 hours a month, the average Egyptian government bureaucrat, because they have all these other jobs, anything from being a taxi to running another company. So a lot of the problem, I think, I've always thought was cultural, that they're supported by American foreign aid and military budgets. All this kind of foreign aid, and this gets you into my foreign aid riff, makes you fat and stupid. It makes you not have to focus on productivity, not focused on innovation, not doing your own thing. And as usual, it's this rent-seeking, corrupt behavior supported by American largesse just for political access and support in the region that's created this cocktail of terrible productivity. So, Egyptian people revere education. They're very cosmopolitan. They're very charming as a group. And if they wanted to be the best entrepreneurs in the world at the nexus of 3 continents, it could be one of the greatest countries in the world. But I think this cocktail of American support and and some cultural issues have prevented them from doing that. The way to go forward is the 2 things I said. Either wait for time, the intergenerational answer, which does seem to be happening, because you see the young people that created the social media thing that, in Tahrir Square. But the other thing is the crisis. It hasn't really hit a crisis yet. It's close, yeah. But it never will, as long as the Americans come in with all that kind of support. If you look around the world, you see these oil-producing regions like Venezuela that never have a crisis, because when their country goes down, it automatically drives the price of oil up, and then the price of oil supports Chavez. So you see that with the oil producers. With places like Egypt, you see that whenever things go bad, Americans rush in for geopolitical advantage, giving them anything they want, and then that averts the crisis. And what's really interesting about what recently happened in Egypt is that we were on Mubarak's side and very explicit about it until it was clear he was going to lose, and then we switched sides. And speaking as someone who works more for foreign leaders than I know more foreign leaders than I know our leaders. Most of the rest of the world pictures America as very naive, ineffective, uninformed, foolish with their money. And I think Egypt's another example of that, probably. Is that responsive to your question?
Well, it is. I mean, there's a huge part of Egypt that depends on tourists.
Yeah.
Nobody's going there anymore. And, one of the saddest trips I ever took was from downtown Cairo to go to
The pyramids. Yeah.
And you just pass this abject poverty.
Yeah, yeah.
That is crushing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating experience, isn't it? Because they've set up the pyramids and the light show, so when you're looking in one direction, it's this vast, majestic, romantic thing. If you turn this way, it's disgusting. And they've really organized, probably many of you have been there. It's really kind of fascinating. They made it for your camera. And if you turn this way, it's like, oh God, go back to this, And that's a metaphor for Egypt, I think. Yes, ma'am.
Israel gets even more foreign aid
Yeah.
than Egypt, and they seem to be being productive.
Yeah, the Israelis are awesome in a way. I'm not particularly, I'm not Jewish or Zionist or anything. I've worked a lot in Israel too. Israel's fascinating because, I've often said to poor Sahelian countries in Africa, you just need like about 6 Israelis here, and they turn this desert into. Oh, they're super punctual. Well, that's sort of where I'm headed. A friend of mine's an F-15 pilot in the Air Force, and he says all the planes that we give the Israelis, they make them faster and deadlier and better maintained than our own planes. So whatever they take it and they improve it, they modify it, and they make it even better. And this is a function of crisis. right? Because Israel is in a permanent state of crisis, existential crisis, high moral purpose, receptivity to doing things in a different way, and leadership that's very action-oriented and very much a shared vision compared to our leadership. It's very understandable what they do. But also Israel would not exist without our economic support. That's also clear, and its own set of issues.
But Israel wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for our support.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I think.
We'd be better off without our support. And I have a list of all the groups and people in Israel who would like to send back all the atomic
Yeah.
bombs we've sent.
Yeah.
We're involved in a very minor way in micro-lending in Ghana.
Oh,
I
nice.
suspect you would say that's pretty one-dimensional.
First of all, if you're going to be in Africa, Ghana is one of the 2 or 3 places you should be, because things tend to work in Ghana. Ghanaians are great people, rule of law, they believe in innovation, things tend to work there. So Ghana is a good choice. Micro-lending has a very specific set of traits, though. It tends to be administratively as costly as regular lending. So if you're subject to market forces like Compartimos in Mexico and some of these other places, interest rates tend to be very high. And what that tends to do is allow people who take out the loans to maintain a nice standard of living where they can put their kids in school, where the moms can stay home, they can do piecework and things like that. The academic evidence, though, now is unequivocal that microlending does not appear to take people from a survival stride to the next level. We're not seeing women take out a small loan and then build a little company and employ lots of people and make it a real company and formalize and move forward. Of course, there are anecdotes where that's true, but as a trend, the upgrading and innovating effect of microlending doesn't appear to have fulfilled its promise. So that would be my critique. Yeah.
What do you do, in light of that, what do you do with a country like Niger, landlocked in West Africa, no coastline, no roads,
Yeah.
with a country like Niger, no coastline, no roads, the curse of some minerals, uranium, some coal, corruption, poverty, in terms of looking for a path to development.
And you left out they're in the ECOWAS zone with the French, colonial history, which is really kind of the problem. Niger. It's desert, a little bit of materials, landlocked, no real, export base. I mean, the role model now is going to be Rwanda that shares all of those traits. And, if you, of the 8 domains, if you subscribe to the basic factor domain, that subsoil assets, location, and sunshine are wealth, then you start to say, well, Niger doesn't really have anything of those except the sunshine, and everybody else has the same sun. But if you subscribe to the human capital domain, the knowledge capital domain, the cultural domain, the institutional domain, then you start to see what Rwanda really did, which is to create higher forms of advantage, more complex exports that they were allowed to sell to the world. I mean, maybe I should double click on that for a second. When I went to Rwanda, you could go see the gorillas and you could go see the safari animals. To get into the gorillas, to do the gorilla trek cost $35. So I was put in charge of the tourism strategy, and I said to the tourism organization, first thing we need to do is raise the price from $35 to $300. They almost macheted me to death because they thought that would drive down the number of people who would come and see the gorillas. That's how most of us would think. But I said, no, raise the price by almost 10 times, then pay the guides more, train the guides in the archaeology, the history, the languages, the culture, build lodges with the money, and take fewer and fewer people who pay more and more price and create a higher profit margin. Well, the tourism people wanted to kill me. And one day we were in Uganda at a tourism conference, and a Kenyan woman stood up, and I was fighting the Rwandans on this, and the Kenyan woman stood up and she said, "My Rwandan brothers and sisters, listen to what he's saying. This is how we destroyed Kenya tourism, by making it cheaper, making it about New York taxi drivers coming over on cruise ships and things like that. And we brought in millions of people. We kept lowering the price. We destroyed the profitability. We couldn't invest in the physical infrastructure, and our product, our experience declined." Well, I'll be back in Rwanda in 2 weeks. I'm going on a guerrilla trek for about the 50th time, taking some senior military officials from Washington over. And it now costs $600 to see the gorilla. And tourism receipts are up, lodges are being built, the roads from the capital to the Virunga Mountains are beautiful. It's absolutely secure and wonderful experience. You see gorillas every time, and that's how it works. In coffee in Rwanda, we took green coffee that they were selling at a loss per bag with 500,000 subsistence farmers, and we had them brand the coffee. We had them put it through washing stations in Rwanda, creating value added, and now it sells in Starbucks for $55 a pound. And so people are getting rich off of coffee. And that's why I say wages in those sectors are going up by 30% a year. So this is a marketing approach, new distribution channels, new customer segments, new government leadership. It's all that stuff, and Niger could do the same thing. So, just how are we doing for time?
Let's take these last two questions.
Okay.
One quick one. I understand the business and entrepreneurial packages that you wrote, at least in Rwanda. Can you talk something about the ownership of private property, land, the means of production?
Land's an issue in Rwanda because the government owns 100% of the land, and you buy 99-year leases. And even the property that people were living on wasn't recorded properly. This was an Hernando de Soto issue. And so the government has slowly recorded the boundaries, given people deeds, and given them ownership in the land, so that's being shifted now. So that's going to solve that problem. It's going to take a really long time, but we've made wonderful inroads into that. So yeah, that's a huge, you obviously know the situation. That was one of the 2 or 3 biggest challenges. Hernando de Soto, the famous Peruvian economist, tells an amazing, funny story. He tells it every time he talks, so if you hear him like 5 or 6 times, you just want to slap him. But if you haven't heard the story the first time, it's a great story. I said, well, how do you register a poor peasant's land? How do you know? Because the peasant knows his land goes from that rock to that tree to this side of the brook. But how do you prove that? And when you go there, how do you believe the peasant when he wants to say his property extends farther than it really does? And Hernando's clever solution was, you know you have crossed over from one rural farmer's land to the next because a different dog barks. Because the dogs know the property boundary, right? And then if you want to find the owner, you wait till dinner time and follow the dog. Last question, please.
I just want to ask another question about another country, which is the situation in South Sudan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's kind of cool about Rwanda and South Sudan, when Darfur, yeah, the crisis, and the oil. When Darfur started to happen, of course it was ignored by the Americans until George Clooney and Mia Farrow got involved. The Chinese have a huge role in this, as they extract raw materials. They provided weapons to the government in Khartoum. They only slightly backed down when they were afraid that they would be embarrassed at the Olympics, when Spielberg backed out. But you know what the first peacekeeping force, this might be the greatest way to end this whole thing. You know what the first peacekeeping force in the world to enter Darfur and to quell the genocide, you know where that peacekeeping force came from? It wasn't America, it wasn't France, it wasn't Canada. Canadians were there. You're Canadian? You know what the first peacekeeping force in the world was to stop the genocide in Darfur? It came from Rwanda. And that's a good way to end this. Thank you very much.